Good morning, students. So, till now, we have read that East India Company came as a small trading company in India and how it spread its power and established its rule and acquired more and more territories in India. And there are so many ways in which they used to fight wars and acquire more territories in India. So at times, company used direct military confrontation also to protect its political and economic interest. So sometimes they had face to face military wars also to protect their political and economic interest and to acquire their rule on that particular area. And Mysore controlled the profitable trade of Malabar coast. So Mysore, present day Karnataka state, was earlier known as Mysore that time, and that sea coast of Mysore was known as Malabar coast. Okay, so that time it was the rule of Hyder Ali over Mysore during the time of 1761 to 1782. Okay, and then he died due to some disease, Hyder Ali, and after that, a very powerful ruler, Tipu Sultan, came into being. He ruled from 1782 to 1799. And by this time only, this East India Company was purchasing pepper and cardamom from the Malabar coast. They were trading from Malabar coast, but in 1785 is the rule of Tipu Sultan. So, but in 1785, Tipu stopped export of sandalwood, pepper and cardamom and stopped local merchants from trading with the company. Okay, so they stopped them. They did not like East India Company to come and rule and do trade, so they stopped the local merchants also from trading with the company. So this led to conflict between Hyder Ali and Tipu versus the company. Now, company saw Hyder and Tipu as ambitious, arrogant, and dangerous. So obviously, if anybody will revolt against you, so that person or company has the power to revolt. That's why it is revolting. So if anybody is revolting against, that means he is strong enough. So company also thought that Hyder and Tipu are ambitious, arrogant, and dangerous rulers, and they should be controlled and crushed. So it was very important for them to control Hyder and Tipu as they were revolting. So consecutively, four wars were fought with Mysore. So company had a conflict with Mysore with Hyder and Tipu, and four wars were fought with Mysore. First was 1767 to 69, first Anglo-Mysore War. See students, wherever this word Anglo is coming, Anglo stands for company. Okay, for the British people. So first Anglo-Mysore War was fought in 1767 to 69. Second Anglo-Mysore War was fought in 1780 to 84. Third Anglo-Mysore War was fought in 1790 to 92, and fourth Anglo-Mysore War was fought in 1799. So you can see that if four wars were fought, then how strong they were, how strong Hyder and Tipu were, that the company had to fight four wars to take over the control over Hyder and Tipu. So that proved that they were very powerful rulers. So in the last war, in the fourth Anglo-Mysore War, the Battle of Seringapatam, which was the capital of Tipu's kingdom, that was that took place there. The fourth Anglo-Mysore War, the Battle of Seringa, it is known as Battle of Seringapatam also, and at last, company win a victory in this battle. Now, the company forces were defeated by Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan in several battles. As I told you, four wars were fought, and in several battles, three times they were defeated by company was defeated by Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. But in 1792, attacked by the combined forces of the Marathas, the Nizam of Hyderabad, and the company. So, see what was the reason for the defeat of Tipu and Hyder. The defeat was there, even the Indian rulers were against them. So Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad, they they joined the company. Okay, they joined the company, and together with the company they fought war with Tipu and Hyder. And in this, Tipu was forced to sign a treaty with the British by which two of his sons were taken away as hostages. Okay, British painters always liked painting scenes that showed the triumph of British power. So you can see in your book also painting scenes are given. So that British painters, they have the it was like their you can say it was their hobby kind of. They used to paint the triumph whenever they won any war. So they used to paint that in the paintings. Okay. Now, events after the Battle of Seringapatam. So, what happens? What happened when Tipu was defeated, and what events after the Battle of Seringapatam took place? So, Tipu Sultan died defending his capital Seringapatam. So, he died after defending his capital Seringapatam. Mysore was placed under the former ruling dynasty of Vodiyars. Okay, so it was placed under the former ruling dynasty of Vodiyars. Subsidiary alliance was imposed on the state. As I already have told you what is subsidiary alliance. So they had to, if the king wanted the army for the protection, so they have to take from the company, and in turn they have to pay something to the company. And in case if they were failed to pay that, so they were cause penalty for that. So in this picture you can see this is a big mechanical toy that Tipu possessed, a tiger mauling a European soldier. So when its handle was turned, the toy tiger roared and the soldier shrieked. It is now kept in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So when the company won over Hyder and Tipu, so they took this mechanical toy of Tipu and they have taken to London, and this is kept in London now in the museum. The British took it away when Tipu Sultan died, defending his capital Seringapatam on 4th May 1799. Now, story of the Maratha Empire. So there was more power of Marathas also. Marathas also, they were also very powerful. So they had a vision to capture Delhi. Okay, so Maratha had a vision. They thought to capture Delhi in the third battle of Panipat, and Marathas were defeated in 1761. So see how this company, and slowly they were acquiring more. First they were joining with Marathas, combining with Marathas. They defeated Hyder and Tipu, and now they fought against them only and defeated Marathas also in 1761. So Marathas were divided into many states under different chiefs like Sindhia in Gwalior, Holkar in Indore, Gaikwad in Baroda, Bhosle in Nagpur. So chiefs were held together in a confederacy under a Peshwa, principal minister. Okay, so Peshwa, what is Peshwa? Peshwa means a principal minister was there who was the head of the chiefs. So chiefs were held together in a confederacy under a Peshwa. So he was the head of the chiefs, which was based in Pune, Maharashtra. So Mahatji Scindia and Nana Fadnis were the two famous Maratha soldiers. So these two are were the very famous ones. So no doubt Marathas were a major power in front of company, but the company eventually destroyed Marathas. So eventually Marathas were also destroyed by the company. And see, Marathas were also very powerful and they were not defeated in the single war. Same like Hyder and Tipu was there. There were four wars. Same in the Marathas also. Company subdued Marathas in a series of wars. Like the first Anglo-Maratha War. Anglo again here stands for the company, British people. The first Anglo-Maratha War took place in 1775 to 82. In this, there was no clear victory of British, and Treaty of Salbai was signed. And the second Anglo-Maratha War was fought in 1803 to 1805, and British proved to be successful, and they gained the territories of Orissa, Agra and Delhi. The third Anglo-Maratha War in 1817 to 1819, it was a major decisive battle. Maratha powers were crushed. So, in the third war, finally, Marathas were defeated, their powers were crushed, and Peshwa was removed and sent away to Bithur in Kanpur, the principal minister of Marathas. Now, so when they were acquiring more and more territories, so different policies were there which they were applying according to their rules, their new rules. So obviously when new people are coming, so they want to impose their own new rules, and they were not happy with the prevailing Indian rules. So whenever they were acquiring new territory, so they were imposing new rules over there. First, subsidiary alliance, I told you. Now one more is there, the claim to paramountcy. Now, what do you mean by this? The claim to paramountcy. From early 19th century, company pursued an aggressive policy of territorial expansion. So, as I told you, that they were continuously acquiring new territories, and that is called expansion of their territorial power. Okay, they were expanding their powers. Bengal, Mysore, and then Marathas. So first they acquired Bengal. They East India Company entered from Bengal, from Kolkata. They defeated them, overtook them, dominated them. Then they went to Mysore. That also they acquired, and then Marathas were also defeated. And then they imposed the policy of paramountcy. Now, what is the policy of paramountcy? Under Lord Hastings, who was Lord Hastings? Lord Hastings, Warren Hastings, first Governor General from 1813 to 1823. Company claimed, so East India Company, they claimed, they made the statement that its authority was paramount, that their power was paramount or supreme. You can say they declared that they are the most powerful, they are the paramount or supreme, hence its power was greater than that of Indian states. And in order to protect its interest, it was justified in annexing or threatening to annex any Indian kingdom. So they were continuously annexing new Indian states. Annexing means to take over, to dominate. Okay, either they were doing it or they were threatening to annex any Indian kingdom, and they declared that they are the most powerful and nobody is more powerful than them. So this policy continued in the process of British expansion. However, this process did not go unchallenged. So obviously Indians were there, and they did not like, first of all, that East India Company was coming and flourishing, and they were making their own rules and their own powers were spreading. So they were not liking it, and every step and policy which the company used to make, that was not left unchallenged, that was challenged by the Indian people. Then another one more policy came, that is the doctrine of lapse. And due to this policy, the company was directly able to take over so many Indian territories. Now, what was that doctrine of lapse? It was a policy devised by Lord Dalhousie, who was a governor general from 1848 to 1856. This policy helped British a lot in the annexation of Indian states. As I told you, how? What did it say? The doctrine declared that if an Indian ruler died without a natural male heir, the doctrine declared means the policy says that if an Indian ruler is there and he does not have a male son, he does not have a male heir, if he does not have a son, his kingdom would lapse into the hands of British. So it was a very easy way to take over the new Indian territories. If the ruler did not have a son, so that kingdom was directly gone. It was directly it directly went into the hands of British. So it will become the part of company territory. So it was a very easy way to annex Indian states. So many kingdoms were annexed simply by applying this doctrine. So according to the rule, they had to follow the rules, and though people opposed the rule, but somehow the power of company was more, so that's why the people had to follow their rules. So as due to this doctrine of lapse, they were able to acquire new territories like Satara in 1848, Sambalpur in 1850, Udaipur in 1852, Nagpur in 1853, Jhansi in 1854, Awadh in 1856. During the annexation of Awadh, British had an added argument. They said, so, with this doctrine of lapse, many kingdoms were annexed simply by applying this doctrine, like Satara in 1848, Sambalpur in 1850, Udaipur in 1852, Nagpur in 1853, Jhansi in 1854, Awadh in 1856. So, now the last territory like Awadh, during the annexation of Awadh, British had an added argument also. See, they were very clever. They said that they were obliged by duty to take over Awadh in order to free the people from misgovernment of the Nawab. So they insulted the Nawab that time. The Nawab, the rulers were the ruler of the Awadh, the Nawab of the Awadh. So they said that it is their duty to take over Awadh. Why it is their duty to take over Awadh? Because they thought that there is no rules, there are no proper rules of this Nawab, and there is misgovernment of this Nawab, and people should be free from the misgovernment of the Nawab. And enraged with this humiliation, so when the Nawab of Awadh came to know this, that the company had said these words for him, he became furious. Enraged with this humiliation, people of Awadh joined the Great Revolt of 1857. So even the people knew that their Nawab is not wrong, and they did not want that the company should take over their Awadh. So that's why they joined the Great Revolt of 1857. Now, setting up a new administration. So now, company was taking over the new territories. So half of the India was under their rule now, and now they wanted to set up a new administration. Administration means the court of laws, the criminal, the justice, the army. So everywhere they want to implement new rules, new laws, and policies. So Warren Hastings, who was Warren Hastings? He was the first Governor General from 1773 to 1785. He played a significant role in the expansion of company power. So British territory was expanding continuously, slowly. Company had acquired power not only in Bengal but also in Bombay and Madras also. And British territory was broadly divided into administrative units called presidencies. Okay, so the area, the whole area of India which was acquired by the company, so they divided that area into administrative units called presidencies. So they had Bengal presidency, Madras presidency, Bombay presidency, and each ruled by governor. So all these three presidencies were ruled by governor, that is, and the supreme head of these presidencies was governor general. Okay, so three presidencies, each presidency was ruled by governor, and all the three presidencies was their supreme head was governor general. And Warren Hastings introduced several administrative reforms. So there were so many changes in the laws, in the judgments also. The new policies were coming because they wanted their own rule. According to them, everything they wanted. So they brought several administrative reforms in the sphere of justice also, and in the sphere of army also. So let us see what all changes they made according to the new rules which they imposed on us. So new system of justice. From 1772, new system of justice was established in which district was divided into criminal court and a civil court. Okay, the court system which we have now, that was brought by the company only, that was brought by the Britishers. Okay, and still now it is followed in our country now. So there were two codes, criminal code and civil code. Criminal code where all the murder and other crimes, serious crimes were handled, and civil court in which their normal family disputes were there, land disputes were there. So criminal court that time was known as Faujidari Adalat, and civil court was known as Diwani Adalat. Criminal court known as Faujidari Adalat, these courts were under Qazi and a Mufti. Okay, so these were the heads of these courts, Qazi and a Mufti, but they had to give their decision under the supervision of collectors. Collectors, you know that today also we have the district collectors who are IAS qualified. They are known as collectors. So these criminal court, also known as Faujidari Adalat, they were headed by Qazi and a Mufti, but they had to give their decision under the supervision of collectors. And civil court, Diwani Adalat, this was headed by Maulvis and Hindu Pandits. Okay, Maulvis and Hindu Pandits, what were their roles? You know, Maulvis are Muslims and Hindu Pandits. So they interpreted Indian laws for European district collector. Okay, some people used to come from the Europe also, and these Britishers, they were assigning them as the collectors of the districts. Okay, they were giving them jobs over in India, and these they were the head, though the Europe this district collector was the head of the civil court, but they had to give the decision which Maulvis and Hindu Pandits were interpreting. Okay, so they Hindu Pandits and Maulvis, they used to read religious books that time, and in the religious books, according to them, what was the best punishment, so they suggested, they interpreted that laws, they give that information to the European district collector, and that punishment was given to the criminal. So was now see, this was the new system which was established by the company. So was everything so easy going with this system? Do you think that bringing up a new system in the area, in the territory, was so easy with them? No, not at all. There were some challenges. Now, the major problem was that Brahmin Pandits have different interpretations of local laws based on different schools of the Dharam Shastra. Now, what is Dharam Shastra? Dharam Shastra were the Sanskrit texts prescribing social rules and codes of behavior. So now see, if you have Brahmin, the Pandits, they are in different states, so they are reading different religious books also. Their schools are different, though they have one common ethic, but still they're studying different religious books, so their thought process is different, and so there was no uniformity in the law. Still, in the civil courts, these Maulvis and Brahmin Pandits, they were interpreting the Indian laws, uh, but there was no uniformity. Okay, for example, you say that one person is has committed a crime, he has killed someone, or any a small dispute you take. Okay, if there is any land dispute, so what, according to the law, there was no uniformity that this person has done this crime, and this is the punishment which will be given to this person all over India. So all over India, different Brahmin Pandits were there, and their dharm shastra which they read were different, their religious books were different, so they used to give different punishments for the same crime in the different states. Okay, so that means there were so much of variation, you can say, in punishment giving. And to bring uniformity, and the company officials, the Britishers, they wanted uniformity in the decision making. To bring uniformity, in 1775, 11 Pandits were asked to compile a digest of Hindu laws. And who translated this? N.B. Halhed translated this digest into English. So N.B. Halhed, he knew Sanskrit also and English also. So he translated this digest into English, and he set up a uniformity in that all the punishments which will be given to that particular for that particular crime would be same, so there would be uniformity. So by 1778 a code of Muslim laws was also compiled for the benefit of European judges also. Same way as Hindu laws were digested and they were compiled into a digest, same way a code of Muslim laws was also compiled for the benefit of European judges, because European judges they were confused that because different different decisions were announced by these Maulvis and the Pandits, so they were not able to judge properly. So to benefit them, both Hindu laws and Muslim laws they were compiled into a common digest so that the decisions were same for all. Now next comes the Regulating Act of 1773. So there were new rules and policies were coming, there were new system of administration, a new Supreme Court was also established. So here comes Court of Appeal, the Sadar Nizamat Adalat. Okay, so this was the criminal court. So this was the first criminal court, or you can say of the first Supreme Court of India. It was established in Calcutta. Now the district. So the principal figure in an Indian district was the collector. Okay, collector played a major role. He was the principal figure in the Indian district, and its main job was to collect revenue and taxes and maintain law and order in his district. And how he used to do it, it is not like that he used to go out and see all the things. So he used to get it done. How? With the help of judges, police officers, and darogas. The collector. Now, the collector was very powerful that time. So he became the new center of power and patronage that steadily replaced various holders of authority. It means he replaced previous holders of authority, means previously there were kings and rulers who were ruling, nawabs were there, kings were there. So now the collectors, who were these collectors? These collectors were European and the Britishers only. So slowly they were becoming the new center of power and they were replacing the kings and the nawabs, which were the previous holders of authority. Now, same way as in the justice, they made reforms in the company also. The company army also, there were some changes there according to the advancement, according to the technology. So, some changes have to be adopted by them. The power of the colonial administration rested on its military strength. Military strength is very important. So, the main power of the colonial administration, the company, the main power of the company was based on its military strength, how much army it had and what is the strength of the military. So army during the Mughal period, so if you compare not the company army, you know that before the company that there was a rule of Mughals in the India. Okay, so army during the Mughal period was divided into two parts. First was cavalry and infantry. What was cavalry? Cavalry were savars. Okay, cavalry army, they were known as savars. They were trained soldiers on horseback, and infantry was paddle soldiers. Okay, savars, cavalry soldiers were who used to go on the horseback holding the swords and then they used to fight. Infantry were paddle soldiers who were trained in archery and sword, but they used to go on foot. Cavalry on horseback, infantry on foot. So cavalry dominated the army and infantry did not play a major role. Why? Why? Obviously because if going on the horse is more easy, it is more fast, and those who are going by foot and they are holding a sword, so that's why it is cavalry dominated the army. They were on they were on horses and they used to go fast and attack the enemy. And infantry on the other hand, they used to walk and fight, so this would take long time to reach the enemy. Changes occur in the 18th century, but there were some changes that occur in the 18th century. Mughal successor states like Awadh and Banaras started recruiting peasants into their armies and trained them as professional soldiers. So they started, Mughal successors were there, so Mughal rulers, they wanted to increase their armies, and what they did, they recruited peasants into their armies and trained them as professional soldiers, and East India Company adopted the same method. So they were cheaters also. They saw that in this way, if they are hiring the peasants and they are making into armies, so this way they would make their power more strong. And so East India Company, they started adopting the same method, that is the sepoy army. Sepoy is what is in Hindi it is known as sipahi. Now, as warfare technology changed from the 1820s, okay, warfare technology means, first they used to fight with sword, and then the guns came, and the guns, there were modifications in the guns also. Cavalry requirements for the company's army declined. So that cavalry means fighting on the horses, running on the horses, okay. So but why it declined? So obviously that if I have a sword, and the other person have a gun, so it is then advantage to another other person who is having a gun, because from my side, if I have to kill him, I have to go near him, and then only I can use my sword. But he is carrying a gun, and from the long distance, from the far off distance also, he can easily shoot me. So that's why cavalry requirements, cavalry means the soldiers who used to fight on horsebacks, so their requirements for the company's army declined, because there was advancement, there was technology in the warfare. Now British Empire was fighting in Burma, which is now known as Myanmar, Afghanistan, and Egypt were armed with. Now you'll say, ma'am, from where Egypt has come? Egypt means they were also fighting in Egypt also. They were acquiring areas in Egypt also at the same time. Okay, so these are the guns of that time, known as muskets and matchlocks. Okay, so these were the guns which were used by their army. So soldiers of the company's army had to keep pace with changing military requirements. So according to the technology, advancements were there, so there were changes in the guns also, with the fighting equipments, warfare technology also. So they had to keep pace with the changing military requirement. Now, another change in the company army was uniform military culture. So that today also, when you go to any army area, so you can see that army people are wearing the same uniform, and same shoes are there, same belt is there, same cap is there. So that was also brought by the company army only. Okay, this change. Another change in the company army was uniform military culture. Soldiers were increasingly subjected to European style training, drill, and discipline. So there was a common training session for all the people in army, for all the army people, and the common training, drill, and discipline, they were taught to be in discipline, and it was equal for all. Often this created problems, since caste and community feelings were ignored in building a force of professional armies. So it was said that to polish their guns, they used a pig fat or a cow fat. Okay, so that in India people are religious, so Hindus, they don't even touch pork. Okay, and cows meat also was eaten by the Muslims, and so they had the community rats were there, it was like hurting their feelings, so they used to polish their guns with cow fat and pig fat, so this would hurt their feelings. So but it was, company was not bothered about that. Company wanted that professional soldiers should be there. So religious society, that India is a religious society, so here religion is important here. So sentiment had a key position that time, but still the company army, the people revolted also, so many people revolted, but still there was ultimate win of company army only. So there was a rule of company, they dominated and they acquired us. So this was all about the chapter. Last part is the conclusion part. So in the conclusion, we can conclude that East India Company was a trading company. I told you that it was a small trading company which came from the British, and it entered India from the east side. It was a trading company, and how it became from a small trading company to territorial colonial power. So more than half of the India it conquered, it acquired. Arrival of new steam technology played an important role in this process. So first of all, there was a first of all example, you say, journey to India from the British Island. It took 6 to 8 months, but now steamship reduced the time period of only 3 weeks. So this played an important role in this process because they were continuously coming and going. Trade was increasing. People were coming. Army was coming. More and more British people, Britishers were coming. So this invention of new steam technology played an important role in this process. So by 1857, the company had a vast empire in India. So this is how they were successful in building a vast empire in India. Company exercised direct rule over about 63% of the territory and 78% of the population of the Indian subcontinent. So you all came to know that what is East India Company, how did they come, how did they become so powerful. So this is interesting story, but it is sad also, because we came to know that how they used us, how even the rulers were sometimes they joined them to defeat the Indian rulers only. So they used the policy of divide and rule also sometimes. Okay, and they sometimes they imposed new rules, and they hurt our sentiments also, but ultimately they were powerful, and they were successful in building a vast empire in India. So in the next chapters we will study more about them. So till now, goodbye, and do the assignment part.